LATAM was up 33%, Spain 432%, Africa 20%. There's so many reasons why this was a pivotal moment for ICE. It's always been positioned as this global event. UK is still number one attendee, but those other countries and those other regions really kind of filled that gap. It was hard work, cold calling. No one used Skype. I remember we had a fax machine. You'd wait for your order to come back through. Direct mail, but you do direct mail by yourself. You'd print it out on the printer, put it in lots of brown envelopes. There was a moment where we nearly lost that entire business, like overnight. That was stressful.
Welcome to the iGaming Leader podcast, where we uncover the human side of some of the most inspirational leaders in our industry. I'm your host, Leo Judkins, and as an ex-iGaming director turned performance coach, I've worked with over 200 leaders from companies like Entain, 365, Flutter, and many more to help them build the habits to achieve sustainable high performance. In these episodes, we share exactly what it takes for you to achieve the same. So with that being said, let's dive in. Hey everybody, welcome to the iGaming Leader podcast. I am here joined today by Alex Pratt. Amazing journey in iGaming. Has been in the industry for a long time. I've been at iGaming Business, now Clarion, Group Managing Director. And yeah, welcome Alex. Really excited to talk to you today.
Brilliant. Thank you, Leo. Excited.
Hey, we've got to start with ICE, I guess, right? So, man, what an event. The feedback's been phenomenal. That must have been such a difficult move for you initially. You must have really been sweating as you kind of moved from London to Barcelona. How were you feeling beforehand while making that decision?
The whole journey of that move was stressful. To be fair, on the last 6 months, I oddly was quite confident. I think that's because the way we did it, we worked with customers. So actually they made the decision for us. And we had so much data, so much research that said it was the right place that we just had to, I guess, go for it. I think it was the bit before which drove us into the process. So when I sort of rejoined Clarion Gaming to head it up back in 2020, back end of 2020, so we were in COVID, and yeah, it wasn't the nicest place to be. I think everyone was questioning events. ICE was being, look, it was the biggest event, so it's the biggest spend, and a lot of people were saying, is it really worth it? So we had to look at everything, including like, is the location right? And it was never going to be an easy journey that made everyone happy. I'm so glad we did it now. And now I can like live in glory and not be fired. But I can tell you it was like a really brave leader-led decision. But to be fair, we found these incredible couple who are consultants that randomly met, the CEO of Clarion randomly met in Singapore, and they helped run this whole process. And it was, if I showed you the Excels, you'd be in there for days of the depth of analysis that they went into. So no, it's brilliant. So happy.
Love it, mate. Like one of the things I really loved as we were talking before the event is how you were even pulling up stats, you know, from registration, kind of how the registration was flowing and registrations from different countries and how they were comparing to previous year. You were saying UK is a bit behind logically, right? Because it's not in the UK anymore. So what did that look like, that whole journey leading up to the event actually kicking off?
That was actually, it turned out to be quite stressful. The bit I think I spoke to you was just before Christmas. It got really stressful. The problem is the way we'll measure registration will be weeks out from the event. The issue we had is the event was taking place, 3 or 4 weeks earlier this time. So Christmas and New Year would have occurred in a different part of the weeks out earlier. So just before Christmas, our registration was flying up year on year. UK was down, but only marginal. And then Christmas hit and everything just fell off a cliff. Yeah. You expect, as normal, you expect that. But then you're kind of like, okay, when are people coming back to work? When's it going to hit? And it was just after January. Obviously, the registrations start piling in. But UK just suddenly didn't really come back. We were about a week into January and we're like, oh my God. Like we had at that point, we were 60% down on UK registrations, and that makes up 40% of our normal attendees. And we're like, well, actually is this going to be made up of other places? And interestingly, it was the companies were coming, but the volume of individuals. So if you use like someone like Hippodrome, which sent 56 people to ICE last year, this year they were sending 9. So because they're sending the right people, and actually they can't just stick them on the purple line to get down to Excel. Luckily, as time went on and tons of people were piling into analysis and creating graphs that were far bigger and cleverer than me, it came in. And look, LATAM was up 33%, Spain 432%, Africa 20%. And actually, for me, there's so many reasons why this is a pivotal moment for ICE. And it's 89 years old, but it's always been positioned as this global event. But actually, it was very heavy UK. And for the first time, UK is still number one attendee, but actually those other countries and those other regions really kind of filled that gap. So yeah, it was a relief in the end, but it wasn't enjoyable for about a week or so, because you're always going to hope for about 10 or 15,000 people to rock up on site. God knows why they don't register before, but you sort of crossing your fingers and just hoping. Yeah. And luckily they did.
And it's like, it kind of gets out of your control as well, right? You've done all the work and now you're looking at the numbers and you can't really do that much about it anymore. So I can imagine.
And we'll run some UK led campaigns at that point and talk about the fact that it's cheaper to come to Barcelona than London if you don't live in London, and try and move. But to be honest, most people have made a decision by then. Although actually, I think a few get persuaded by social media and FOMO. I think actually, and it was still like only 100 quid on the fly, 120 quid. So I think a few people jumped on last minute, but it's kind of out of your control, which is hard.
It's always, well, we would have had the same conversation if it would have been horrible, so like, I'm happy that you're here and you're not fired, so that's good. I wanted to kind of start at your start, if that's all right. I saw that you've been in the industry for a long time, but you kind of coming out of uni, you started in sales, and I always love talking to people that kick off in sales. Tell me a little bit more about that. Like, why did you kick off in sales, and what did that teach you about, leadership in general, and how did that help you in your career?
Yeah, look, it was a conscious choice, but one that I didn't really have much control over. I did sociology at Portsmouth University. Portsmouth's a lovely university, but the combination of those two doesn't set you up for walking into some high-powered like grad program. So you open the Guardian and the first 3 pages are just ad sales jobs. So you go on the train. I ended up working for the Institute of Mechanical Engineers. They had their own publishing magazine, Membership Mag, selling the tiny little box ads. And I was there 4 years, and it is UK engineering. And God knows when that was, 2000. I mean, UK engineering is hard anyway. It's always going to be tough. But at that time, everyone was kind of struggling. But we also had 32 competitors. We were a weekly, a monthly. The internet it existed, but no one was selling ads online. It was hard work, cold calling, there was no Skype. No one used Skype. No, I remember we had a fax machine. You'd wait for your order to come back through. Direct mail, but you do direct mail by yourself. You print it out on the printer, put it in lots of brown envelopes. But yeah, it was brilliant. And it really, I think it sets you up for resilience. Mixing with people that you wouldn't normally mix with, and weirdly, whatever I'm in, I become passionate for. So at the time, I'd go to the pub with my mates. We're all 3 years out of uni, and I'd be banging on about CFD and FEA analysis and like drivetrains and stuff I can't even remember anymore. I remember going from that to the gaming industry, and I made my first call, and like in engineering, it's all about like, what's the response rate? I'm not going to read books, blah, blah. And it was like one man. And I remember speaking, I can't remember if it was microgaming or Chartwell. And I was like, well, what are you looking? No one even cared about response. No, they were just like, you could literally make a phone call and people were just booking ads. And I was like, this is the best industry ever. But the greatest thing is I applied the work ethic to that. And suddenly, it's not from an arrogant perspective, but I think a lot of people, because my competitors, they were kind of doing the bare minimum because that was making them lots of money. But if you just applied actually the 32 competitor ethic, my God, like we broke records immediately on the first issue, and all I do is pick up the phone. Yeah, it wasn't anything special.
I see what you mean. It makes a lot of sense, right? Because you've been taught and you've set a certain standards and a certain bar for yourself, right? In that previous role, picking up dials, running dials, doing 100 calls a day, whatever it is, right? And obviously a lot of competition, and then coming into gaming. And I'd love to talk a little bit about when you joined the magazine iGaming Business. There was, I think it was a quarterly print at the time, smallish, and you it exploded as you were there. So tell me a little bit more about that journey and how you grew it and how that all kind of manifested itself.
It was amazing, really. I started, but it's the best weekend you could ever start a job. We started on the Friday, I flew to Vegas on the Saturday. Luckily, and I don't know if you've had him on here, but highly recommend a guy called Rob Dowling. There's 2 Rob Dowlings in the industry. But Rob Dowling, at the time, Pentasia, and Bruce, and Rob's brother, I call him my sort of father of gaming. So I sort of went to Vegas with him. They were the biggest customer of iGaming business, but we were also the biggest platform for them. So they were starting up as well. They'd use our boardroom and our creative, and I'd use him to help me like meet and understand people. And it was just a brilliant time because everything was exploding. I was young, naive, didn't know what the limit was. I got on the plane, and on the back of in the internal flight in America, back of every seat was, I think it was one of the old casinos that don't exist anymore. I was like, bloody hell, there's online casinos at the back of headrests. And it was just such a sector that was growing up really fast, but also so friendly. And I think that for me, that's always been all the way through, actually, that it's just a really friendly, helpful sector. And you could go in and be quite vulnerable, that you know nothing, and you suddenly met the world, and people introduced you to people. And and then my first meeting was with a lady called Aideen Shaw, that's now a consultant in Malta, who was the marketing director at the time for Chartwell. Yeah, and it's brilliant. She's my mother of gaming. Rob and Aideen, my mother and father. People say she's also the godmother to my child. So I mean, it really is.
Oh, wow.
You kind of become these close relationships. But she taught me about how marketing works. He sat there and got this. I remember this yellow pad saying, "Look, this is what we want as marketers. This is how it works. What we measure." And it's just little things like that you just go on this journey. And then look, the growing that magazine was just a whole journey of mistakes and successes of, look, should we try this? Should we try that? I remember going to a show and seeing people have webinars. We're like, well, let's try webinars. And 20 years on, we're still bloody doing webinars. Still doing them. Or reports or subscriptions and data. There's so many things we launched and failed, but also many that luckily survived. But it was, it's a brilliant time. Stressful, but brilliant.
I bet. What was some of the most difficult times that you've had there, Alex? What was like moments where you thought, oh my God, this is just, where is this going to go?
There's probably, back then we launched Cat Magazine, which was a joint venture with casinoaffiliateprograms.com that later became called IGB Affiliate Magazine when we bought them out of that joint venture. We also launched Cap Euro with them as well, which then became the affiliate events you see at all the shows now. There was a moment where we nearly lost that entire business, like overnight. That was stressful. And actually, I remember seeing in October, probably, it was our first Barcelona event, so it would have been around 07, 08, probably 08. And we sat at this table like, this is amazing. Like, that affiliate market was super young at the time. It was so connected. Our aim was to legitimize affiliates, like make them be proud of the job they do, like give them a voice, give them a platform, whether it was in the forums, on their forums, or at the same time, the guys that owned it had seen an opportunity and launched their own online casino and poker. Unfortunately, they weren't honest with the market about owning it, and actually they started to compete with their own customers. Now it was our business, but they were tied into ours, and that turned into a whole load of stuff that you could probably find online and who knows where. But they fell out at that point. The industry then suddenly felt that they didn't want us to organize the event, so created something called GAP, gamblingaffiliateprograms.com. I think about 20 of them met in a room in Amsterdam to talk about whether they like relaunching their own event, like they don't need us anymore. It was a rapid 3 weeks of rebranding to IGB Affiliate, and it had to be something generic because we're still joint venture partners who might go back, and it's the only reason they're not called it anymore. But for years it was called London Affiliate Commerce, Barcelona Affiliate, Budapest, blah blah. Any insert city, have to buy every possible domain in any city we might end up at, and then just calling the customers and just being. And the thing that got me through was that I'd always been completely transparent, honest with the market, and actually people trusted me. And when I said, look, this is going forward, this is like, and we had to have, I don't know if you've ever seen Jay Todd, he used to APCW, he was quite actively watch YouTube channel, and it has to be Jay Todd proof. Like Jay Todd has to be able to come in, look at our accounts, look at this business, and actually nothing is wrong with it. Like we're transparent, we're part of the market. So we did a lot of work, and came out. Luckily, the events continue, we continue, but it was really stressful because at the time, iGaming business was owned by a very small floated company on AIM, and it was one of the bigger parts that made the profit for the business. And actually, the event certainly made a big chunk of that. So there was like stress around that and losing the entire business. But luckily we didn't, and everything became good. Thankfully.
Great. I mean, it's that must have been, like you said, it was super stressful because it feels like it's spiraling, right? And it's a lot of stuff that is then out of your control because other people are having these meetings and kind of setting these things up. And how did that affect you, like personally?
God, it's such a long time ago now. I think the problem is back then, well, I was quite young and fairly naive, but for me, it was really personal because it was about who I was as a person rather than the business. And actually, I always really believed in karma and being a good person. I don't know if that's like something weird in my upbringing that I always want to please people. I had a therapy the other day and she couldn't work out why. I've got this innate thing that I just want to make people happy. I want them to be happy. So I think I found that really difficult. I had a really good CEO at the time. He taught me a few things. One is just actually, look, you've just got to stay true to yourself. Saying sorry is like one of the most powerful things you can ever do. Rather than trying to defend, actually saying, look, we messed up, or I'm sorry. And actually it gives you all the power back, because actually at that point, the other party or person, all they can do is either say, well, I don't accept that and get angry, or accept it. And actually, I think that helped a lot, but it was difficult. And I don't think I had a lot of the tools back then to understand like how to deal with those sorts of things.
You power through it, right? And it's like you said, it feels then a personal attack almost, because it questions your integrity. So that is so tough, especially when you don't have the tools.
And we have that a lot in events. The difference, and my background's publishing events, we just fell into and made it up as we went along. It was easy to make mistakes for the first few years because the industry wanted the event and we were their partner. So they would forgive you all along the way. And actually they were with you for those mistakes. I think as you get bigger, and certainly when you're in Clarion and you're seen more as this corporate, you're not seen as individuals and people. With events, everything is laid out. Like there's no hiding. If something bad, if no one turns up or something goes wrong, there's no hiding from, and it really is criticism. You're an individual, which doesn't often happen, I think, in other sectors, because your mistakes are often not seen or could be hidden pretty fast.
And everybody talks about it, right, straight away. And after, well, you've seen it now with ICE, it's turned out very positively. But that's exactly what happens, right? If something goes wrong straight away, and people love a bit of complaining as well. So it's usually under a microscope straight away too, right? So when you think back to events, let's take an events in general, and there must have been things where there must have been situations where that's happened, and that must have really kind of hit you. Have you had those situations? And if so, how did you deal with it?
Yeah, tons of times. And the worst is when you're on site, and when we were a smaller business, and I have a slightly different strategy now, but we throw events out everywhere. Like we'd see opportunities and we did them in France, in French, in Spain, and in Sweden. We'd follow any kind of trend and look, some worked, some didn't. But some of those where you're on site and but half the people don't turn up. In answer to your question, I used to just go and hide in the loo. That was my
really,
because there's nowhere to go. You can't go to the staff room. You can't go anywhere. And I used to, Richard Wanachicero, who now works for Sigma, reserved for me, and I'd be like, I've just got to go to the loo. And you just put this, you just put the seat down, you sit there, close the door, and you'd be like, oh my God. And sometimes you might have a cry. Sometimes you just have your own quiet place to get away from it all. It is really hard. And I think something you always learn in an event, it takes a few years, is that it always will be okay. Like nothing is going to be the worst, although it may feel like the worst thing in the world, it will always be okay. And I think you just have to do your best and be honest with people. And for me, as I've got older, it's human to human. Like you can be as angry as you like at me, but I'm a human and you're a human. So let's like relax. Like there's more to life than at that moment in time, it feels like it's everything, but actually there's so much more to life than getting really stressed.
Yeah.
It's hard to think that in the moment.
Exactly. When you're in the middle of it, right? And especially if you're, like you said, you're people pleaser, you want to do your best, and you have worked, like the outcome is something different from how much time and effort you've put in. So you know how much time and effort you've put in, and that's a ton, right? And because you want to do your best. And then there's this person that turns up out of nowhere, hasn't put in the time and effort, and criticizes that thing that you've, rightly or wrongly so, that thing that you've put so much time and effort in. So that must be that's such a contrast between who you are and like the effort that you've put in and then the feedback that you're getting. That's tough.
Yeah. And customers in gaming, look, the vast amount of them are confident, not afraid to tell you what they think. When I was younger, I found it really hard to deal with those situations and those situations of conflict. As I get older, more mature, more experienced, actually, I think it's just much easier just to, attack them as an individual and actually know that. And that could be where a customer in the past probably hasn't been polite either to myself or a member of staff. And in those days, I probably would have let it go. Now I'm like, well, actually, do you know what? That's not how the world works anymore. If you're going to make someone feel like that, you're not welcome at this event, and it doesn't matter how much money you're spending. I think it's been a shift in society about making people accountable for behaviour. Also, I think a shift in the confidence I have in order to be able to say, actually, that's not okay. And in fact, part of our briefing pre-event, we do a big event brief for the staff. Part of it is that there's a section called "It's Not Okay," and it's not okay for you as a member of staff, but also not as okay for you as a attendee or an exhibitor to not feel okay on site, no matter what, whether it's behaviour of someone or someone might be exhibiting something in a certain way, and they will rely on things like code of conduct to deal with that. But I think over time I've become more confident to be able to deal with that stuff.
Let me ask you about that then, Alex, because we talk here on the podcast, we talk a lot about authentic leadership. It's a bit of a buzzword, right? And but we all know that being yourself is like the way to go. That's what real leadership is. However, I think the problem for most people is not that they're not authentic, is that they're afraid to execute on their boundaries, if you will, to be, like you were saying, this behavior is not okay, right? That like saying that is difficult. And I think that's kind of what you're describing. That changes over time, right? As you get older, but also as you put in the reps and you realize that, when things go wrong, actually the world is not going to burn down. It's going to be okay. You realize those things happening. So how's that now? What are some things that have helped for you to set stronger boundaries around what you do and do not accept?
Part of it's just education and learning. I've got a girlfriend now. She opened my eyes up to feminism a while ago. I read the Sheryl Sandberg book and I was like, oh my God. Then read, I can't even remember the name of the book, but there's a whole book around data and around everything from, I don't know, the way a car is designed on the bag being exposed to the size of an iPhone, to the temperature we set a room, to all these things and things that aren't fair. And then as you start to dig into these sorts of areas, I start to care more. And I think me as a person, I think I've just started, and not that I didn't care before, I just think some awareness and understanding and I guess experience in life. Like I would say, if I held my hands up, I remember a lady that worked for me many years ago got pregnant, and in no way did I do anything legally wrong, but I actually don't believe I dealt with it in as sensitive way as I could have, in terms of like understanding that actually their feet swell and they may not want to come in, understanding coming back to work and really being sensitive about that, and actually not realizing how nervous that person is to come back to work. Having then had a child, multiple children now, and seeing the other side, it makes me much more aware of how people feel. And I think I've tried to, as I get a bit older, I've tried to think more about how people feel and what's morally right. And actually, it's okay not to make money if you can do what's right. It's about a balance between driving a business that can be really successful, but also just doing what's right. And when I come across it, I get angry these days and I do something about it. I think there's something's changed in me now where I also don't want to be that leader that sweeps it under the carpet. And I remember a couple of years ago, there was someone at work that felt uncomfortable about someone's behavior, and I'd heard about it via someone, and they hadn't raised it because they were like, actually, no one's going to do anything about it. What's the point? And I was like, this is ridiculous. So I spoke to her, we dealt with it, we investigated it. And I want people to know that if you're going to raise something, we will do something about it. And the only way I can do that is by standing by that every single day and in every single opportunity throughout our business. And that we will get things wrong all the time. But yeah, for me, just one of those, I guess, personal pillars that I want to act on. I want people to feel safe, and I want people to enjoy work and be happy. And I want some, and look, and unfortunately, the majority of times it is sleazy men or men that are using unconscious bias or don't realize that they're behaving in a certain way. But actually, there's stuff of that can be mended through discipline, but a lot of it's around education and actually understanding that I talk a lot, too much, to be honest. It was being aware that a female or someone from an underrepresented group often doesn't talk up in a meeting. Mm-hmm. And actually, you as a leader need to be able to make time and try and get their voice in the meeting, whether or an introvert, all these things. It's just being aware of these things. So some of it's not intentional. So yes, become a real sort of passion for me. And I'm certainly not as good as others, but it's something I want to constantly educate myself on and become better.
I think it's amazing, Alex, because that adaptive leadership is all about your awareness of it, right? It's not about you being perfect with it. And you still, like you said, you still go wrong, and that's fine, right? I think that's one of the big mistakes we make in leadership in general, is that we think everything should be perfect straight away. As soon as we make a decision on how we maybe change our behavior or how we change the way we work, we think, it needs to be, that's the way I'm going to, and it needs to be perfect. And then it goes wrong. Of course it goes wrong because it's the first time you're kind of practicing it, but it's in that journey, right? Of falling over and getting back up, just like a baby learns to walk. It's the same thing, right?
And I think half the problem is too many, in the past, there was too many examples of incorrect leadership that you tried to emulate, and now there's too many YouTubers telling me that I should be like this guy going mental. And the bit for me, and I've seen some great leaders, young and old. There's some incredible, like in gaming right now, we've got two, unfortunately they're both called Amy, but leading the sales team, and they are brilliant leaders. They're really vulnerable, authentic, and actually they've learned that really fast. And for me, that was the difference, when you realize you didn't need to be perfect. Like I remember when I was splitting up with my wife and I was moving, it was during COVID, and I was moving from into another place, and I started putting up a background because I was like, God, in a few weeks people are going to know. And then my coach was like, why are you not telling people what's going on in your life? I guess part of me didn't want to get into it. And actually, once I did, it allowed people to understand what I was going through and why I suddenly had this weird background. But also it just allowed you to be seen as a human. And that things do go wrong. You don't need to hide it. And like the other day, we had someone leave the company that had worked with me for 15 years and may have had a few wines, but I got a little bit emotional in the speech. And it was an impromptu speech, didn't know I was going to do it, did it. And actually, it was interesting that one of the guys that's worked with me same amount of time came up to me and was like, that is the best speech I've ever seen. I've never, honestly. And then 2 weeks later, he was like, I'm still thinking about that. I was like, bloody hell, I thought I looked like a blubbering wreck. But it turns out, like, you still have moments. Well, you're always learning, and it's like if you can be a bit more, it's that authentic. You don't realize that it's the bit that actually people want to see, not the Gordon Gekko standing on stage telling you always be closing.
Yeah, coffee is for closers.
Exactly.
I love it. And you know what I think as well, Alex, is that when that happens, right? Like the example of you and your wife breaking up, when you actually step into that, right, your authentic self and just openly communicating about it, it's no longer in the back of your mind all the time, right? And now it's not a weight on your mental energy. It's not something that you're constantly thinking about. And as a result, it massively impacts your performance, your overall well-being, how well you sleep, all of that, right? And we hold on to so many things. And if we would just let go, or if we would just talk about it, it changes everything. But it's the 100%. Fear of talking about it, right, is why we often don't do it. The fear of judgment. Is that how you felt as well?
Definitely. I think you're right. What you do is you store things in the back, and if you don't talk about it, you don't need to deal with it. And I think I do that quite a lot, to be honest. I'm in a similar group to what you run, but it's a mixture of sort of founders and MDs and things like this from multiple sectors. It took me a year to realize the best thing about that group was talking about actually what was going on in your not your big business. Brilliant. We all have the same problems. We'll solve it together. But actually, it was about what was going on in my personal life, whether it's health or troubles at home or like finance or ambition or like kids, all these things. And I remember we do a once a year goals retreat, and it's fascinating. The first time I did it, my goals were all business goals. Everyone else's were like lifestyle and health and family. I was like, oh, I've got, and a year later, I almost broke down up there. It was the time when I'd split up with my wife. I was moving out. There was so much going on. I hadn't talked to anyone about it. And my God, I remember one of my goals was like, I need therapy. But it totally changed my relationship with the group and what we talk about and how we help each other. You have to be so brave.
Yep.
Or it feels like you have to be brave. Yep. Actually, once you've talked about these things and been yourself, it's not that brave. But at the time, it feels very hard.
You just got to get over yourself, right? You just got to take that first step. I see it all the time, especially with new people coming into our group, big hesitation. And then as soon as you pull the trigger on that first bit of emotion that you share, wow, what a game changer,
Because it's all about relationships. We've got people in our group where they've got co-founders or business partners. Yeah. And actually, it's a lot of the problems they have it's not business, it's the relationship with the people they work with. And actually that's life we need to learn together.
Hey, if you're a VP, a director, founder, or executive in iGaming, and you want to achieve sustainable high performance without sacrificing your personal life or your well-being, then the iGaming Leader Mastermind might be your kind of thing. It is a highly vetted community in which we work together with other iGaming leaders in the industry to achieve that sustainable high performance. Because leadership in iGaming can be really lonely and isolating. But when you've got the right people around you, it can make such a difference to your performance, your productivity, and your personal life. So if that's something you want to know a little bit more about, head over to igamingleader.com and apply to join. I've got a few questions from our iGaming Leader Mastermind. One of them, by the way, Alex, was how do you stay looking so young after all these years?
No, and not even Botox. I'd love to say it was Botox. I love running, and I did something years ago called Whole Life Challenge, which I've not affiliated with, and it was brilliant for me for about a year and a half. It's like 7 habits. In fact, you've got habits written back there, but it's like wellness, drinking, sleeping, flexibility, exercise, and you change and you get points. And I love scoring in competitions, and that actually changed my life forever. Like just in terms of just being aware of lots of different things, and some things I will repeat or not repeat, but being thankful and just being happy, I think keeps you young. And I've had a 4th child after 9 years of having 3. Well, I've got 3. The youngest is 9. And I've just had a 4th about a year and a bit ago. And to be honest, I tell myself that keeps you young.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got no choice. If I get old, I'm going to got to pick it up.
Yeah, I love it. We had a question from Richard Marquis. He's at Flutter, and he said, you've seen the evolution of the industry events firsthand. What constitutes a good event in today's landscape? And do you think the current packed calendar is sustainable? I mean, there's great question. I think there's so many, right? So what's your views on that?
On the pack calendar, it's not sustainable. Don't know how many times I've said, if you keep spending money, they'll keep doing it. But I can see consolidation happening, and I could see changes. I could see people merging their events with themselves. I can see halls declining. I think we've probably got a year more of it, and I think we'll see change next year. And I've made all the mistakes, not saying mistakes, they might work for them and actually work for us. We sold the business and it's brilliant, but there is this innate, I guess, when you're an entrepreneur and when you keep chasing and you keep inventing new and you keep expanding. And so I get a question, why are we not doing an event in Brazil? Because everyone's doing one. You can make money. And probably if I threw one out there, I would make money. But it's not what the customer wants. Actually, the amount of time, resource and effort to launch events all over the world is a massive drain, especially on your team. It doesn't make sense from a business perspective. And when I took over, that's why I closed 26 products since 2020. And that was training products, that was some content, but that was Ice Africa, Ice North America. I did close the Brazil event that had been there 12 years. I mean, stuff all over the world, because actually we just focus on our core and the margin goes up. The people can just focus on that. We can not bomb our data, or they may think we do. Anyway, So yeah, I think it will consolidate. It's ridiculous. It is ridiculous. I've never seen a market like this. I think what makes a good event, look, it comes from a personal perspective. For me, events have changed since COVID and will keep changing. I think experience has become a lot more important now than it was pre-COVID, because that we speak to a lot of companies now that use the events not just to meet buyers and sellers. Actually, it's to meet their team. But a lot of them in the evenings aren't going to the parties. And actually, that's having team dinners, because that's their time to meet. I also think as a consumer, I've always felt strongly about this. Just because we're in a B2B environment doesn't mean we're not a consumer anymore. So I think actually giving that consumer feeling, I think as sustainability becomes more important and choice of where we go, I think that experience element is really important. I think there is an increasing focus on ROI or value, actually value. We've done a load of analysis recently about what data across the entire Clarion portfolio, what are the data points that drives repeat business and an increase in spend. And the event industry as a whole relies on NPS, and still does. Investors do, and we'll keep NPS. But NPS has zero relevance for future spend or you coming back to the show, because you can have a bad taxi queue, it could rain, and that'll influence your NPS. What it is importance of show, value for money, not ROI, because value can be measured in different ways. It could be branding or whatever it may be, and obvious one, intention to return. They're the three biggest bits of importance. So for me, value is something we as an industry, not just Clarion Gaming, have to start focusing on, because for far too long, we're like, oh, it's really hard to measure events. Carry on coming. And that's an attendee or an exhibitor. So, but we're sitting on so much data now, and we previously weren't. So some of the data we've got coming out of ICE this time, if you've got the app, we can see dwell time on stands now, because we can, as long as you're on the Wi-Fi on the app, so we can see dwell times. We can do all your click data or your search data on exhibitors. We can see what meetings you asked to create. We can see if they happened, or if that person didn't accept your meeting. We see what you said in registration, post-registration. Can then cross that all with the data from our websites and exist. So we can start to build a picture of what a good event looks like, not just for the whole group, but actually down to an individual level. And for me, if we can start to bring in AI and a kind of almost like a co-pilot, that's where I think we could deliver the best of the best event. We know what people like you do at the event and what they want to achieve, and that co-pilot will then work with you to design the best event possible for you, as well as creating meetings. And I learned that is blue sky, but it's not that impossible. And having a company like Clarion makes it possible. But a good event could be a dinner.
Yeah.
Right. For me, some of the best moments of my life have been on a dinner where I've sat beside someone that's inspired me, or by accidentally met someone at one of the event bars. I think depends what you're going to achieve. And actually, I guess that's what part of our role is, to start to understand that an individual and see if we can deliver those personalized experiences. And that's where we want to bring in AI to do that.
Yeah, I love it. I love what you did as well with the chatbots. Really cool.
The thing about that chatbot, it's brilliant. It's reactive, but it's not proactive. It's not able to go, do you know what, Leo? These are 3 people you should meet. And I've already spoken to them. They want to meet you. This is where I'm going to, and this is a dinner you should go to. And like, do you know what? You shouldn't stay an extra day. I mean, I don't want it to say that, but
no, but it should be, it should be like that, right? It should be like a CRM setup.
Yeah.
Right? Exactly. I love that.
And there's no reason why we can't do that.
No, I bet. It's just, yes, you got to have the data and the triggers for it. So Carl is a co-founder of a marketing agency. He was there with his team, and he was asking, what are some of the patterns that you see for people that really win at these events? What separates the most successful attendees from the rest? And I guess that depends on your goals, of course, but what are some, what are some of the things that you've seen that make people feel that they've had a real good success at an event?
Yeah, look, I think if looking at it from 2 sides, one from an attendee perspective, and I think both are very similar. And so a lot of this stuff's obvious, but planning, but being really clear about what your objectives are. What are you there for? I think like something I do when we go to G2E, for example, when you add it all up, expenses, hotels, flights, our stand, it costs us a fortune. So we have to be really clear about what our objectives are there. And is it new business? Is it retention? And that should feed into all of your plans. And then utilize everything the event company or organizer has. So whether it's the app, whether it's material that you can use, look at the sessions, look at the speakers. Can you think outside the box of I don't know, events? When I was a little scrappy challenger brand, I'd be running and drinks outside the venue, and me as an exhibitor might get annoyed about that, but actually exhibition, I actually love it because it adds to all the experience and value. So I just think, look, a lot of it's about clear objectives, planning. I think from an exhibitor perspective, I think same thing, but then you really need to think about, and especially if you're a small to medium business, is where you're spending your money and being really clever about that. Before I was owned by Clarion, I used to take a stand at ICE and I spend quite a lot of money, but I'd really think about what the objective of that stand is. And in an offline environment, I see tons of mistakes of where you put the text, where people are going to stand, like what are people doing on the thing. I've seen some really good companies I know that will literally run an entire day of like role plays, people coming on like casting the net in a generalist way. But as English people, I tend to find are not very good at running an exhibition stand. We're not going to walk into the aisle and grab people, and I'm not saying that's, but there's somewhere in between. Americans are brilliant at it. They're confident. And I think you need to think about who you're putting on the stand. If that's your goal, is actually new business, you need to think about who's managing it. And then I think you need to think about how you're going to measure those results. And there's lots of different ways. So we will work with customers, like say it's branding. We can do work with the people registering as they come in, as they come out. And we can do that over years to see actually how we increasing or changing brand perception. And we can utilize our online and things like this. If it's leads, it's much easier, but actually really think about it. I talked to you about and reach out to Adam Azor at Sport Radar. I parade him out all the time. I've had him speak at a conference to me for gaming marketers. He measures everything. He measures dwell time. He measures leads. He measures leads to conversion. Even if that takes a year and a half, he makes all his decisions based on that data. Plus, if they're looking to get into new markets and branding. But I think don't expect the event to pay your money and expect you've got to spend more. And it's the same as I used to run a business. We split them and only sold half it together. We used to run a business called Sport Business, which was B2B sport. Back before we sold IGB, and we had a big sponsorship product. And what you'd say generally in sports sponsorship is whatever you spend on sport, on the sponsorship, you have to spend again to activate it. Just because you've got a giant stand doesn't mean it's going to work, or a double decker or flashy, or you bring a footballer. It's a bloody expensive channel, and you've just got to think about how you're going to utilize it, because it is so effective and brilliant if you do it well.
Yeah, and I suppose there's a lot of opportunity there as well for you as an event organizer to help people with that, right? Because the value that people will get out of that, not just out of that event, but in the follow-up and your education on how to actually monetize the value and being there.
We talk about selling campaigns to customers, and actually we talk about the event is the thunderclap moment of the campaign. And it doesn't have to be our event. We'll do it for SBC, we'll do it for Sigma or G2E. And for us, that's the conversion part of the funnel. Like that's where, and we don't really have that many conversion products. Really, the events are our conversion products. So everything we do before that, whether it's PR, content marketing, webinars, display advertising, retargeting, is all about driving your target audience onto your stand for all pre-show, creating those meetings. So you've got to think about how are you going to drive that awareness and down that funnel to have that meeting on site, if that's your aim? And then also, what are you going to do after to continue that conversation? Because actually, look, rarely is the conversation doesn't start at the event, it doesn't end at the event. So it's just part of that marketing journey. And it's just thinking smart about it. And I think there's some really clever marketers in gaming. I think there's also some really good marketers, but could do a little bit better, who sometimes have got a little bit too much money. And actually, if they thought about where they spend, and that will happen as we start to see budgets tighten, and they will one day.
So I've got a question from Luke Cousins, Sean Brasington, and Vincent Costello. They're asking about work-life balance. You do a lot of travel, right? You run international events, a lot of pressure, 4 kids. How do you maintain your energy, and what does your strategy look like post-event to make sure that you actually are able to just be there again? Because the work doesn't stop, right? When you're away, it usually piles up. So what's your strategy there? Have you found something that works?
Yeah, loads. And to be honest, my work-life balance is actually pretty good these days. I make far more intelligent decisions, and actually the team's much bigger, so there's less pressure. And I feel bad for my other 3 kids because I probably was traveling far too much, in a way, a lot. Now I don't go to every event anymore. I don't accept every meeting or dinner. And to be honest, I can't. I just don't have the time. I choose to spend time with my family and friends, like on purpose. And actually, if I'm going to not, it's got to be for a reason. I think I work a lot smarter these days. Like I kind of grid my days up, and I really focus on making sure I prioritize those big rocks, because they're the things that stress me because I never get around to them. So I tackle email in a way that I start at the top, and I build that into a time so it doesn't drag me constantly throughout the day. So I start at the top and I delegate it, deal with it, delete it, and all these different tactics you get taught over time. I'm obsessed with having nothing in my inbox. It stresses me if I don't. And then I block out every single, and I should say this because it looks like I'm busy in my diary and now people will probably abuse it, but from like 9 till 10:30, I block that every single day for just catching up on stuff. Initially, I blocked it for 45 minutes. And I remember my coach going and saying, well, what would happen if you doubled it? And so I did, and nothing. And I can use it now and again if there's urgent meetings or things to do, but it really just gives me permission to use that time effectively. And more recently, actually, I've started to think about a different time. I had a really good session with a guy recently that talked about thinking time, and actually quite often I was using that thinking time to carry on doing projects and ongoing big things. And actually that's not strategic thinking time, like solving the questions like how do we create more value at an event, like bigger. And actually one of my next things is to build a bit bigger chunk every week. And he had some good suggestions, like name that time, because actually he said your calendar is the best marketing device for you. So actually if you want to grow a $5 million marketing agency, call it the $5 million idea time or whatever it is. And so, yeah, there's lots of things. Like I still probably work late sometimes, but actually I will finish at 4 because I've got to pick up the kids sometimes. And I think having a really good boss that allows me to work flexibly, contractually, I'm supposed to do X and X, and I try to behave in that same way downwards. So it's about trust. And I say to people, look, if you're not doing the job, you're going to get fired anyway. So work the hours you need and take the days you need. It's true. And if you can fit it into and I think it's really important that the world is really different now. And whether you're remote work, got kids, not got kids, got whatever is important to you, you just got to prioritize what's important for you. And then as a leader, as a worker, you'll just be so much better. You'll have more loyalty to that company. And I've seen it all the way through. I'd say, yeah, brilliant. I love my work-life balance. And sometimes it goes crazy and busy and Mondays kill me. And then I have to just remember, actually, I always feel like this on a Monday. Once I have got on top of the first 4 hours, I'll feel better again. It's at the moment, I feel horrendous after ice, but I had a good day yesterday and hopefully better day today and slide into the weekend.
But what I love about what you're saying is really that time blocking, right? Taking charge of your time and then actually being disciplined about your boundaries around it, on how you use that time, being intentional about. I think you're absolutely right. Your calendar follows your priorities. You should literally be able to open somebody's calendar and that tells you their priorities. And if it doesn't, then you're living on everybody else's timeline instead of on your own.
And I still have that happen all the time.
Of course, yeah.
But I think look, a big thing for me is like when I have to have shared custody with my partner, life changed at that point. Like before, I took advantage of having. She didn't work that much, so I could do whatever I like, be wherever I like, work as long as I like. And actually, the kids got to be picked up and given food. Yeah. And so that means I've got to work my bloody arse off for 6 hours and probably put 10 hours work in there in order to be able to then deliver that. And actually that is easy. It feels like you're working hard, but it's brilliant. I love it.
Yeah.
It works really well for me at the moment.
Thank you very much, Alex. Amazing interview. I really love talking to you. Thank you.
No, I've had such a pleasure. Really, really different, really inspiring.
Thank you for joining me on the iGaming Leader podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, head over to igamingleader.com for more conversations and insights. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. I'm your host, Leo Judkins, and I hope to see you next week.